is Jean-Paul Bedard. I'm a published author and feature contributor to Huffington Post and a columnist with I Run magazine. And I'm an elite Canadian endurance athlete, a veteran of over 120 marathons. But those are simply words on my letterhead. They are not the words that resonate in my head. Most recently, I've come to see myself as an international advocate for survivors of sexual violence. Despite all the incredible efforts of the medical community, the social service agencies, and in some cases the police services and courts, I believe that this picture represents the most important piece of the puzzle when it comes to responding to sexual violence. It's a picture of my wife taken last month on the dark streets of downtown Toronto as she waits for me to complete my second of 3 marathons that I was running that day. It's a picture of someone who has stood by me for 29 years. It's a picture of someone who has stood by me as I battled through drug and alcohol addiction, suicidal depression, and most recently a very messy and very public disclosure of the sexual violence from my past. I guarantee you that even though there is only one person standing in this picture, it is indeed a picture of 2 people. What does a perpetrator of sexual violence look like? We raise our children to be hyper alert to stranger danger, yet the danger could come from your father, your mother, a sister, a brother, a neighbor, or in my case, from a hockey coach who sexually abused me when I was 9 years old. To this day, I can still smell his acrid sweat, feel his coarse hands down my pants, and there are many nights that I shudder and wake up screaming or crying as I hear the words he said to me when I finally broke free and ran away. No one will ever believe you. 26 years into our marriage, after years of witnessing firsthand the catastrophic aftershocks of untreated trauma, I finally found the courage 3 years ago to disclose to my wife that I had been sexually abused by that hockey coach when I was 9 years old, and then a few months later worked up the strength to also disclose that at the age of 12 I was violently raped by 2 men in a ravine in North Toronto. What do you do? What do you do when your partner discloses something of such weight and significance? I can tell you what my wife Marianne did and didn't do. She didn't doubt me for a second. She didn't press me for more details, but more importantly, she didn't try to fix me. Instead, together, we learned that there is a big difference between being there for someone and being there with someone. As an elite athlete, I've been able to use my high profile to speak up about the issue of sexual violence in our communities. And I've been fortunate that my message has reached many people, not only across Canada, but also internationally. But I'm here to tell you that I am but one of a very small number of men willing to come forward and speak about this issue of sexual violence and how it reverberates throughout an entire lifetime. I lie awake at night terrified that I will burn out before I can reach more people who need to hear a message of hope. Last month, I ran the Toronto Waterfront Marathon to raise awareness of the prevalence of sexual violence in our communities. In order to generate the greatest media buzz, I decided to run the marathon 3 times in the same day. That's 126.6 kilometers. My run drew incredible media response, not only in Canada, but around the world. In every interview I did leading up to this run, I focused on three things. One, the prevalence of sexual violence in all our communities. Two, the inner resilience we all have, but rarely tap into. And three, the importance of personal accountability and community and how we are all stronger together. I went out before midnight on the night prior to the marathon, and I ran the marathon 2 times before the official start. During that time, a few friends in the running community came out to support me by joining me in a few kilometers in the dark. Here's a picture of my buddy Frank, a man who has known me since kindergarten, and he is a man who loves me unconditionally. Frank ran 30 kilometers of my second marathon, and this is a picture of him hugging me at the finish of that second marathon. Just imagine. Imagine if I could have had this conversation we are having right now with Frank all those years ago. Imagine the trauma that never would have metastasized. I even managed to convince Premier Kathleen Wynne to join me for the first 5 kilometers of my third marathon that day. Now, if you are about to meet the Premier for the very first time, I'm sure you would like to look your best for that occasion, and more importantly, have your wits about you. When I walked up to the Premier that morning, I hadn't slept for 36 hours. I had just finished running 84.4 kilometers. I was sweaty, disheveled, and completely hypothermic. But when she saw me, she reached out, wrapped her arms around me to try to get me warm, and she looked me dead in the eye and she said, "What you are doing today for our community is amazing, and I thank you." The Premier ran with me in support of the It's Never Okay campaign. It's a campaign that reminds us we all have a role to play in standing up and speaking out against sexual violence and harassment wherever and whenever we see it. One of the less publicized stories that took place that day is the story that perfectly encapsulates what I'm trying to achieve in my advocacy work. Late that afternoon, I crossed the finish line with a young lady who is herself a survivor of sexual violence. When I asked her to run the third marathon with me, she was reluctant at first, worrying that she would in some way slow me down. I promised her that I would never leave her behind. With 2 kilometers left to go in the marathon, this young lady turned to me and she said, "I can't finish this. It's too overwhelming. I can't go on." I turned to her and I said, "I promise never to let you go, as long as you promise to never let me go either." Here is a picture of the two of us hugging at the end of my 126.6 kilometer run. Yes, I am a survivor of sexual violence, but my past does not define me. It strengthens me. Here is what I would like you to take away from this conversation. Healing begins with a conversation. Let's get better at talking about the stuff we don't like talking about. Stigma isolates, stigma traumatizes, and stigma kills. Stigma breeds in silence. Acceptance and openness help put an end to stigma. Putting a face on what a survivor looks like and what a perpetrator looks like. It's easy to argue about and to dismiss the statistics related to sexual violence. But by putting a face on survivors and perpetrators, we make it more difficult to ignore how pervasive this issue really is. Moving from bystanders to upstanders. If you see something, say something. If you feel something, be something. Be that person who is there for someone else who is struggling. It starts with you, right here, right now. Look around you and find someone who is struggling and hang on to that person for dear life. So I'll close again with this image of my wife, Marianne, waiting for me in the darkness, like she has on so many other occasions in the past 29 years. She believed in me until I could find the goodness in myself that had always been there. She has reached out and held on to me even when I'm not in the picture. Thank you.